really lovely to join you on your Sangha Night. Really lovely to see, well, lots of familiar faces, faces that are becoming more and more familiar to me, faces that I've known for a long, long time, and some new faces as well. Really lovely to see all of you. And one of the delights of seeing, with gallery view, I've got gallery view on, so I can see your little boxes and many of you in your homes and your little bookshelves and color schemes. I'm slightly shocked at Arta City's red walls, which I don't know how you live with that. They're very lovely, and your red mug, Arta City. Anyway, very nice to see all of you. And so I'm in my room, my bedroom in my community, which is above the London Buddhist Centre. It's right at the top of this Victorian building, which was a fire station. And I say that partly in order to apologize in advance if there's noise. It's a noisy community, and at the moment you can't hear very much of them. I hope that David upstairs doesn't start playing his accordion, or Matt next door his saxophone, or somebody downstairs playing their whatever it is. And you might hear noise outside as well. Bethnal Green is just a noisy area, and I've got police sirens often whizzing by, etc., etc. But anyway, it's very, very nice to join you and sort of invite you into my space, my room. And yeah, I wanted to, well, when Kamala Nadwa asked me what I wanted to talk about, for a while I was stumped, actually. I don't know what I want to talk about, I thought, and it took me a while to get back to him. And then I realized that I did really want to talk about this subject of meaning. For me, this question of what life was for, what life was about, what the meaning was an important question from childhood. Perhaps it was for many of us here, maybe all of us here, and many kids, I think, probably children, go through a phase where they want to know about the meaning of life. And I became obsessed with that as a little boy. Why was I here? Why were any of us here? And what were we meant to be doing? And often people grow out of that, don't they? They sort of, I don't know, become accustomed to getting on with it. I didn't seem to grow out of it. For me, it became something of a burning question. And so I can remember sort of thinking, well, if death isn't the end, and I was convinced that death wasn't the end. My dad had died when I was quite young. I was convinced that death wasn't the end. It wasn't just wishful thinking. I had some sense of staying in communication with my father, and some evidence, psychic kind of communication, that death wasn't the end. So then that brought the question up even more urgently, was if death wasn't the end, then life as I knew it wasn't the whole thing. I had a sense that I wasn't seeing the whole picture. And if I wasn't seeing the whole picture, then that begged the question of what was this life in the bigger picture? What was the meaning? What was the point? It wasn't a question that sort of upset me. It wasn't a depressive question. It was more a curiosity that was underlay a lot of my childhood, a lot of my adolescence, and into my 20s. And in a way, it's what led me to the Dharma. So I was doing one of these Zoom teaching sessions a few months ago with Maitreya Bandhu, who's a dear friend of mine, and we live in the same community. And we were both doing this session. We were having a conversation. I think it was with the Sheffield Sangha. And we started talking about the difference between meaning in life and meaning of life. And so I thought I'd try and explore that a little bit more. I don't know if it's a real thought, if it actually holds water. So I thought I'd try it out and see what you all think. I think it might have something real to it. So meaning in life, I'll start with that, and then move on to meaning of life, and then I hope that we have some time for questions at the end, so we can have some more sort of dialogue and interaction. So meaning in life, what I was thinking, what Maitreya Bandhu was thinking, what we were thinking together was, well, to put it succinctly, that meaning comes from something beyond self. I guess it becomes clear if I differentiate between meaning and pleasure. We all know what pleasure is. Pleasure is sort of easy to define. It's pleasing sensations, pleasing sense experience through any of our senses. So that's kind of pleasure. Meaning's harder to define. I looked it up, and one dictionary definition was talking about the significance and purport of a thing. The significance of a thing, the purpose of a thing, the purport of a thing is aligned with the meaning of a thing. So in terms of life, it's what gives life significance, what gives it a purpose, what gives it significance. Perhaps that's how we could think about meaning. And well, in my life, I know that no matter how much pleasure I have, and I have quite a pleasurable life, no matter how much pleasure I have, that doesn't add to the significance of my life. Does that make sense? That pleasure is not the same as meaning. And yet, I think it's so easy to get the two mixed up and to live for pleasurable sensations. Maybe you don't do that. I'm a greed type, and pleasurable sensations are always beckoning and always sort of available. My greed doesn't extend to, I don't know, big cars and houses and things. I don't have the means, but in a way, the impulse for seeking pleasure can align a lot, sort of alight itself on smaller things. So I've just had a delicious sort of homemade muffin with Ben and Jerry's ice cream for dessert, and I was really determined not to miss out on the dessert because there was a chance that the team meeting, and dinner was running late, and the team meeting might mean that I didn't have the dessert, and so there I am about to give a talk on meaning in life, and half my mind's making sure that I get my bit of muffin and ice cream. And I even said to one of my community members, if you make coffee, don't be shy. You can bring it into my room. I'll just be in a team meeting, and he did, bless him. So it's embarrassing to think about how often my mind is aligned towards the next pleasurable sensation. Yeah, and one could. I'm glad to say I don't, but one could make that the central purpose of one's life. A friend of mine's just come back from, I was chatting to him at the weekend, and he's just come back from a holiday on hopping around the Greek islands with his new girlfriend, or relatively new girlfriend. It sounds idyllic. He was telling me a little bit about how idyllic it was. He's a very good-looking man. Apparently his girlfriend's a very beautiful young woman, younger than he is. He's very much in love, and they're on Greek islands, which is great, isn't it? Which is great. And anyway, he started talking to me about some of the things that didn't go so well. And, even when there was beautiful people, beautiful beaches, the water was turquoise blue, the sun seemed to be always shining. No, it wasn't all well in paradise. And I can't go into it because that's his story, and he might not appreciate me telling you the dukkha that there was on his Greek island holiday. But nevertheless, do you see, the pleasure is seldom unadulterated for very long. It's, if we try and make that the center of our existence, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Whereas meaning is something much deeper that can be a sort of refuge, as Furujoti was talking earlier, even when there's pain. In fact, pleasure and pain don't need to touch the basis of meaning, if there is meaning in our life. And what I was thinking is that meaning really comes from an ideal beyond ourselves. You don't have to be a Buddhist for this. I think that most people would agree that the most fulfilling aspects of their life are to do with people or projects that take them beyond their immediate self-gratification. I think most people feel that. So I was looking at Viktor Frankl and what he had to say about meaning. And Viktor Frankl's a very quotable and very inspirational figure. He was a Holocaust survivor. In fact, he survived several Nazi concentration camps, including Auschwitz, and became a psychiatrist and a psychotherapist, and started a new type of psychotherapy that was based around meaning in life. And his famous book, of course, is Man's Search for Meaning. And he talks about how he's no longer alive. He died, I think, in 1997. He talks about how meaning, well, he has three sort of bases for meaning in life. He talks about meaning through work, meaning through love, and meaning through suffering. So I'm just going to touch on those. I'm not going to elaborate too much. But meaning through work, I think we can probably all relate to that. If we've got particularly if we've got a vocation, that can provide such a sense of fulfillment. I never, until I became a Buddhist and started working at the London Buddhist Centre, I didn't have a vocation. I was working in a corporate kind of setting, and there wasn't a real sense of fulfillment, because, you know, I was working in tech, in IT, but the company I was working for was Marks and Spencer's. I was working on their food distribution systems and warehousing systems and clothing systems and da-da-da-da. And I can remember talking to a director once of the company, I shan't name him, and he was telling me about how he got really excited every Monday morning when he learnt how many millions of pounds of strawberries Marks and Spencer's had sold. And at that point, my heart really sank, because I thought, oh my goodness, I never want to get excited at how many millions of pounds of strawberries have been sold over the week. I never want that to be the source of my fulfillment. And I knew I had to leave. And it took me a few years to sort of extricate myself. Whereas my sister, from a very early age, she knew she wanted to be a teacher, a school teacher. You know, even when she was a little girl, that was what she was going to be. And she was a school teacher. She's now retired. But that provided a great deal of fulfillment, and she helped a lot of young kids. She was a very, very good teacher, had a real passion for teaching and a real love for children. And she, yeah, that was a vocation. It was a fulfilling thing to do, meaning through work. Whereas work just for oneself to earn money is soul destroying in the end. That's what I found anyway. meaning through love, I mean, this gets to the heart of things, because I do think that the basis of meaning is metta. The basis of meaning in life, I think, is metta. And I think that's what Viktor Frankl means by love. I mean, he might mean romantic love as well, but I think he means more than romantic love. I think he means something like metta, something universal, something that links one human being to another at the deepest level, and that transcends death. I'm really glad this evening that Virujyoti, before we did the Metta Bhavana, talked about Linda and her death, and then a few weeks ago, I believe, Liz's death. And you know, I didn't know really either of them, but I was trying in the Metta Bhavana to send them metta, to wish them well, and I do have confidence of metta as a force that transcends death. And Subhuti was recently talking, he was doing some study on the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and he was saying that, you know, after death, when the body is has gone, the body has died, it's said that the consciousness that's freed from the body is many, many times more sensitive than it was when it was embodied. And if that's true, and I believe it probably is, then the metta that we feel for Linda, Liz, and others who have died will reach them. I mean, they'll experience it. That's what I like to believe, and I see no reason why it might not be, why it doesn't, why it's not true. So yes, this sense of love, of course, in our Sangha, Bante's created this. Bante Sangharachita has created, I think, a world. It's like our Sangha is a whole world in itself. And in our Sangha, metta is the underpinning. Not always. I know that there are conflicts and disagreements and disharmonies. Unfortunately, even in the order, there are sometimes conflicts and disagreements and disharmonies. Disagreements are fine, it's the disharmony that becomes painful. But nevertheless, more than any collection of individuals that I've encountered, I believe this Sangha is founded on metta, and it's lived. It's lived. That's my experience in terms of friendship, that is so precious. So for me, friendship, you know, I'm now 50-something, 54, 5 nearly, and the friendships in my life, I think, are some of the most meaningful aspects of my life. They're what give my life meaning. For many people, of course, that will be family and children, particularly if you've got kids. I haven't got kids, but I can understand that, you know, if you're a parent, that's where a lot of meaning might come from, at least until the children are adolescents, and then it's not so easy, I'm sure. But it's often through our love for others that our lives are fulfilled. I was thinking of Shantideva's verses in the Bodhicharyavatara. Shantideva was an 8th century Indian Buddhist saint, teacher, and the Bodhicharyavatara is one of his major works. It's a guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, and one of the verses in that is, well, let me just read it to you. All those who suffer in the world do so because of their desire for their own happiness. All those happy in the world are so because of their desire for the happiness of others. I'll read that again. All those who suffer in the world do so because of their desire for their own happiness. All those happy in the world are so because of their desire for the happiness of others. When he says all those happy in the world, I don't think he's talking about pleasure. I think he's talking about all those that are fulfilled in their life. They're fulfilled because they desire the fulfillment and happiness of others. He's talking about metta. And if we're in touch with metta for other people, that brings a huge amount of fulfillment in our lives, if that's how we live our lives. If I live just for pleasure or my own happiness, it's paradoxical. It becomes, well, I think we kind of know this, it's diminishing returns. There's only so much pleasure that the human body can take or the human mind can stand before the Greek island holiday with the beautiful lover becomes dull at best or even painful at worst. So I think serving others, contributing. Viktor Frankl, the third area that he talks about meaning in life is through suffering. I mean, what he says about this, I think is really interesting. I think it's interesting for us as practitioners who are trying to recognize the truth of suffering, of dukkha, and transcend it. What he says is that if we suffering is inevitable, and when we encounter suffering, if we don't lose our moral sense, if we don't lose our sense of metta, and if we approach suffering with courage, somehow that leads to a deepening of meaning in life. So he's not saying that suffering's a good thing. He's not saying that. And of course, this is a man who suffered horrible things himself, but also witnessed the most appalling suffering, more appalling than I even want to imagine. And he celebrates the courage of many of the people that he encountered in those concentration camps, and the fact that they found they didn't let go of their moral sense, and they found dignity and even meaning through inhuman suffering. Maybe I won't say more about that just yet, but I want to move on to what do I mean by meaning of life, the meaning of life, because I don't think that work and love, even metta, and courage in the face of suffering, although they're really, really noble, I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's enough. Many, many people have, as I say, meaningful work and live from kindness, probably much more so than I do, and probably have shown much more courage than I've ever had to show in the face of suffering. I mean, I know many people like that. And you can do all of that without any sort of spiritual or religious impulse. You could do that as a secular humanist. Or you could be a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu or any other faith, and you'd probably find similar teachings of transcendence through work, love, and courage in the face of suffering, in the face of mortality. So what makes Buddhism different isn't to be found in any of those things. I think that's really important. And that's where I want to move on to the meaning of life. I think without the meaning of life, or at least the striving towards it, we could be thoroughly good people, The Sangha could be a really good community where we are really concerned for each other's well-being and still remain thoroughly unenlightened, move no closer in a real sense to wisdom, to perfect vision, to enlightenment, to Buddhahood. And that would be a real shame. That would be a real shame. And I sometimes, sometimes even in our order, I sort of sometimes feel concerned that much of the discussions that we have in the order, many of them, are to do with well-being at this level and kindness at this level, but not necessarily transcendence towards enlightenment, towards becoming a bodhisattva in Shantideva's, in the sense that Shantideva's pointing to. So meaning of life, what I mean by meaning of life is seeing through or having a direct experience that's not a conceptual thought, that's not an idea, seeing directly into what it is to be human and conscious, what it is to be alive. In a sense, this, to do it fully, would mean enlightenment itself. The Buddha saw, when he became enlightened, he saw not just his own previous lives, but the countless round of birth and death and rebirth and re-death that all beings are undergoing. He saw that somehow we live our lives looking for fulfillment, not finding complete fulfillment, and then coming back and doing it again. And in each life, it's shot through with pain of one sort or another, lesser or greater, but nevertheless some dukkha, some pain. This ceaseless struggle for fulfillment without end and without real success was his vision of samsara. But the reason he could see that is that he stepped outside of the whole show. He stepped with his consciousness outside of life as we understand life. He stepped outside of himself. He stepped outside of what we think of as human consciousness. And what he discovered was a whole other dimension of mind, of consciousness. And in this other dimension, there is real fulfillment. There is real fulfillment that transcends and is untouched by anything that happens in this material plane. Because on this material plane, in the world of the senses, at the level of sense experience, things will go wrong. People will leave, people will die, we will get sick. On this material plane, we can't have everything that we want. And even if we get everything that we want, something in our hearts remains unfulfilled, sort of untouched in a way. On this material plane, we'll never get the satisfaction, the fulfillment that the human heart yearns for. The Buddha saw a dimension of consciousness where complete fulfillment is possible and which is untouched by this material dimension, this samsaric world of the senses. It's untouched by that. So the Buddha, when he was, when his body was sick and old and he was near death of the body, his mind would have been still in touch with this other dimension, which is untouched by ordinary pain. There would have been no diminishment in the fulfillment and even the bliss. He talks about the bliss of enlightenment and the peace and the love. There would have been no diminishment of that, even with physical pain or loss or whatever the world throws at us. It's a complete transcendent consciousness. The amazing thing is that that consciousness, that dimension of consciousness, maybe enlightened mind, however we want to call it, absolute reality, that dimension of consciousness is our own birthright. It's part of human consciousness, but it's a part that is normally hidden from us. It's hidden from us, and we're not at all even aware that it exists. So we live on the surface of our minds, of our consciousness, without touching this other dimension, this transcendent dimension. And this transcendent dimension isn't a personal consciousness. It's not mine and it's not yours. It's not even the Buddha's. Not really. I mean, you could say it's universal. It certainly is beyond the distinction of self and other. It's not mine, it's not personal, and it's not any one individual's. It's a dimension where our individuality is transcended. It's transcended. It's not lost, but it's transcended. And it's in that dimension, and it's out of that dimension that I think we can really see what it is to be alive. What is it that life is? What is it to be conscious, to be embodied, to be in a world where there are sense experiences and other people? What is it to be in a world with other people? In this dimension of consciousness, it's not that the differences are eradicated. A Buddha would still see, while he had a body or she had a body, a Buddha would still see as we see. They'd still see Arthur City's room as shockingly red. They'd still see all of that. And yet, they wouldn't identify with any of it, including identify with their own body. There wouldn't be any sense of a separate self. They'd see it all, they'd experience it all, and yet any sense of separate identification would have disappeared. So then there would be a spontaneous outpouring of empathy, of connection, of love, of solidarity with all life. And it's only from that perspective could we really see what life is. Most of the time, we don't have a clue. We stop even questioning. I mean, here we are on a rock, spinning at thousands of miles an hour round some star. Again, going round at thousands of miles an hour in a galaxy, in possibly an infinite universe with an infinite number of galaxies, who knows? Here we are, and all of us, a few decades ago, we weren't here, or at least not in this form. Now we are. In a few decades' time, none of us will be here. Something's going on, but most of us don't have a clue as to what that is. And I think that it's only through stepping outside of ourselves and our normal habitual consciousness can we really get a sense. So this is what the Buddha's wisdom is. This is what it means, I think, to really renounce. Renunciation is a real virtue in Buddhism. And I know I could renounce a lot more, Uh, you know, since the headphones, I've bought some other kit, which I'm not going to tell you about just yet. I could definitely renounce more. But, you know, I could give up the headphones, the iPad, the iMac, and all those things, my share in a car and all those things, and still not be closer to enlightenment, because the real renunciation is, can I give up identification with this body? Can I give up identification with this mind? Can I transcend even a sense of me existing as a separate entity in this world, in this universe? That's a deeper renunciation. It's said that an enlightened being has no desire for existence even as a separate being, but no desire for non-existence either. It's not like a death wish as a separate being. There's no desire in it at all. There's just an openness to this whole field of awareness, of experience, including all other beings that arise within that. So I'm going to maybe pause now and see if there are any questions. Yeah, no, maybe I'll just say one more thing. That this meaning in and meaning of, I think we need the both. Because the wisdom alone isn't enough. What the Buddha did after enlightenment was carry on engaging with the world by teaching other people, as many as he could, the way to enlightenment, out of compassion. The meaning in life that I was talking about earlier, where I was saying it comes through an ideal bigger than ourselves, that seems to me to do with, something to do with compassion in the Buddhist sense, karuna, mahakaruna. And the meaning of life that I was talking about, this stepping outside of ourselves, stepping into a new dimension of consciousness that is our true birthright, letting go of any identification of me as a fixed and separate entity, as of self. That is to do, I think, with the ideal of wisdom. And the two have to go together. One without the other doesn't make sense. I already said that the meaning in life, on its own, it becomes, at best, a sort of secular humanism. The meaning of life on its own becomes rather abstract and theoretical and dry, because it has to be lived out in love and connection with other beings, if it's to be real. So do you see meaning in and meaning of? I think it's worth questioning ourselves and thinking, well, where do I find meaning in my life? And is it meaning in? And am I interested in the meaning of as well? Am I interested in this transcendent possibility? Okay, let me see if any of you have any questions. We've probably got about 10 minutes if there are any questions about meaning in and meaning of life. So meaning in, I was talking about as living from metta. Viktor Frankl talked about it as work and love and courage in the face of suffering. And meaning of, I was talking about as a transcendent consciousness that sees the whole picture. So I think if you have any questions, Vijayati's going to sort of MC, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I'm having a look to see if anybody's put their hand up. I can't see anybody at the moment, but if you'd like to ask a question, would you like to pop your hand up? Just having a look through again. Oh yes, I've got a question from Alex and Amritavani.
Hello, where are you?
They're on the...
Hi there.
Oh, hello. Alex.
Oh, it's a question from Alex, actually. Hi, yeah, in meaning in life, you mentioned those three areas. Do you think you need to have all three areas, or can you get away with maybe two of them?
And which two would you get away with?
Meaning in love.
Yeah.
and perhaps not meaning in work.
Meaning in love, yeah, maybe not in work. I think of course, there are no rules here, and I think that many of us are forced to do jobs that we don't really find very fulfilling, and that's a sad truth. But sometimes that's how it is. We can't necessarily always choose. I think if that is the case, then maybe make sure that, I don't know, minimize the amount of time and energy that goes into it as much as possible. The emotional energy as well. Like, don't become like that M&S director who lived for his strawberry sales figures. At least invest that sort of emotion in work that isn't really meaningful. I of course, always work in progress, trying to find a more meaningful way of being. So I have really meaningful work. I work, for the movement, and largely at the London Buddhist Centre. Currently, I'm doing teaching a course in India during the week, as well as here tonight, and it's very meaningful. It's lovely. It's really wonderful, and I don't spend all my time thinking about the Dharma or working. Last night I was watching Dragon's Den, for heaven's sake, on Netflix. That's some sort of rerun of Dragon's Den. Completely meaningless. There was some couple trying to make a business out of selling a new type of gin. And what am I doing watching that? So, even though I've got a very meaningful life in potential, I'm not able to always stay at that level of activation of meaning. I would have been better off meditating last night. I had a free evening. I don't know if that helps, Alex, but
Yeah, that is quite helpful, especially what you're saying about emotional investment in something that isn't meaningful. Yeah, thanks.
I think it's worth keeping questioning, and maybe every year or two questioning, well, where am I still finding meaning in my life?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've got another question from Kamala Matti.
Where are you, Kamala Matti?
Hello.
Hello there you are. Hi.
Hi. Hello, Jnanavaca. Yeah, I was just wondering whether you could give us some sort of pointers towards the kind of meditation practice we might engage in to connect us a bit more or bring us a bit nearer or something to the meaning of life, to kind of help us to move towards and understand it, or some insight into what that is for ourselves.
Yeah. Well,
Does that make sense?
I think one thing that we can do is keep reflecting on the lakshanas. The lakshanas, which some of you may not be familiar with, are the hallmarks. The Buddha gave 3 marks of this material conditioned world. And he said that if you look really, really carefully at your experience, any experience, you will find these 3 marks of impermanence, that everything is changing, of unsatisfactoriness, nothing completely brings lasting fulfillment, no experience in this sense-based world, and insubstantiality, that nothing has inherent existence. Now, what Bhante says is, somewhere, I think, Arta Priya can correct me if I'm wrong, is that we should be reflecting on our experience all the time. And I think he means reflecting. He may not have said this explicitly, but I think he means reflecting in terms of the Dharma, i.e. say in terms of the lakshanas, not just reflecting on did I get what I want or not, but reflecting in terms of the Lakshanas and using the Lakshanas as a lens through which we see our experience. Now, the reason we do that is not because we want to get depressed about impermanence or unsatisfactoriness or so on, but because these Lakshanas are doorways into that transcendent consciousness that I was talking about. If we could really see that everything in this sense-based world is fleeting and ever-changing, and there's no thing to grasp, if we could really see that, I think there would be a deeper letting go of the grasping. And then what would happen, if there is a letting go, is an expansion of mind, of consciousness in this transcendent way. Now, those Lakshana practices, I mean, there are lots of versions and variants on them, aren't there? The 6-element practice being one of them. Sadhana practice includes not just these Lakshanas, but also a sense of devotion and faith in the 3 jewels, in this transcendent dimension. I think we have to cultivate that. I think all of those are practices. I think that it's very easy for us to lose confidence in this other dimension, or to lose heart that this other dimension is possible for me. Yeah, we might think it's possible for Shantideva or Sangha, but not for little old me. Whereas I think part of our practice must be to cultivate the confidence that it's possible for me, for you, for all of us. It is our birthright. I don't know.
Thank you. Yeah. And so can I ask just say something, follow up a little bit, which is, I have a sense that faith, Shraddha, I mean, that's what you're talking about, I guess, that confidence, isn't it? That faith. The more I can cultivate that, then the more likely I am to sort of stay on task almost, or something with the practices.
I think that's completely true. And also what Bhante says, and Subhuti has said, is that faith, Shraddha, is a prefiguration of wisdom. It leads into the wisdom that I was trying to allude to. So it's not, if we're in touch with faith in this higher dimension, embodied in the 3 jewels of the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, then in a sense, we've got a glimpse of wisdom.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great. So I'm just aware that Chris Duries has a question that he posted on chat, but it'll probably have to be a fairly quick answer.
If I can, Chris, where are you? Chris says, I feel like I get a lot of meaning from being in nature. Where does that fit into the 3 categories? Is it meaning through love? Well, I think nature's really, really important, Chris, both through this sense of connection that you imply, but I think that when you're in nature and feeling connected, there's also a possibility of a glimpse of wisdom in that sense of connection, because what it can do is remind us that we're not really separate, that we're part of nature. Nature's not just some pretty scenery out there. We're part of it. If you can have a sense of being immersed in that, there can be, at least for a while, a momentary sense of being freed from the prison of our self-referential, small-mindedness in the natural world, in beauty particularly. Bhante's put a lot of emphasis on the experience of beauty as a path even leading to insight. There's probably more to say about nature, but thank you very much, Chris. I'm going to have to probably pause and wrap up there. But thank you very, very much, all of you. And worth thinking about, where do we find meaning in life? And also, are we moving towards a realization of the meaning of life? We need the both, the wisdom and the compassion.